NIGEL Farage, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
You stood down as UKIP leader just a few days after your triumph, the Brexit victory in the referendum. You said, "My political ambition has been achieved." But it hasn't, has it? We don't know what Brexit's going to be like.
We won the war, we now have to win the peace, and I get that. And I mean, don't forget that I'm staying on as leader of a group in the European Parliament. You know, I will see through that process once Article 50 finally gets declared. So I'm still going to be involved.
You very rarely go to the European Parliament, so that's not much of a pulpit. You've abandoned your main pulpit. You were leader of UKIP. You really important stuff of what Brexit will look like is still to be debated, and you've walked away.
Well, I wasn't going to be asked to be directly involved in the government negotiations. I will, as a former leader of UKIP in the United Kingdom, commentate on what the government are doing, encourage where it's going well, chide a bit if I don't think it is going well. I don't need to be leader of UKIP to do that. What I've stepped back from is leading a domestic political party, heading it into the next set of elections, you know, endless by-elections, county council elections, and all of those things. And, you know, I've been doing this quite a long time.
Oh, I'm well aware of that. You and I have been talking for quite a long time. But the cynic would say, and certainly those critical of your Brexit views would say, you know, you smashed up the shop and now you refuse to engage in the repair process.
You know, you could argue it's never over in politics, couldn't you? You know, you and I could sit here in 2.5 years' time, and we've got Brexit, but there's an opposition party who wants to challenge it at the next general election. It's never over in a sense in politics. But this is what I do think. I do think that we will leave the European Union. The question is on what terms.
Right, you see, the new leader of your party, Diane James, she says, and this is a direct quote, "It seems odd that you would vacate the stage when the people in charge cannot be trusted."
But however well I do as party leader in county council elections doesn't really affect that very much, does it? You know, whatever I do in a by-election in Witney or whatever it may be doesn't really affect that very much.
Well, of course it does. It affects it in the same way that because of the surge of support for you and your party in the last few years, David Cameron was effectively forced to take the decision to have a referendum. So you are important. You seem to be denying your own importance.
I'm not running away. I'm still there. I still exist. I'm still part of UKIP. I will support the new leader.
Well, she's probably going to be a bit worried then. If you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to be as important as ever. I mean, you're not the leader anymore. You can't be leader and not leader at the same time.
In terms of commentary, in terms of engaging in debate, I'm going to be there as I was before. What I won't be doing is dealing with party politics.
Let's now focus on what Diane James said about the Tory party, the Tory leadership not to be trusted. Article 50, that is the formal way in which the negotiating process between Britain and the European Union is triggered. It hasn't been triggered. It seems now from Theresa May's words that it won't be triggered until 2017, and many of those around this decision seem to believe it may not be taken until late 2017. Do you think that's acceptable?
That would be a disaster. That would be a disaster, because in terms of, once Article 50 is triggered, in terms of our negotiations, one of the biggest opportunities are the elections taking place, the presidential elections in France in the spring of next year. And of course in Germany, we've got the general election happening in October of next year. And one of the big things that British negotiators need to do is they need to go and meet every German car manufacturer, every French wine, well that may be pushing it a bit, but the big French wine producers, because ultimately, you know, a non-tariff free deal, which for us, by the way, doesn't sound very attractive, but it's better than where we are now. But a non-tariff-free deal actually affects German workers and French workers far more adversely, potentially, than it does us. We need to be making these arguments and making this part of the German general election.
Just to be clear, when you talk about a non-tariff-free deal, you are saying, are you, that you believe it is possible to get a deal which involves tariff-free access to the single market, while at the same time completely walking away from the principle of the free movement of labour?
Well, there are 48 other countries in the world that have just that. I mean, this is the point, isn't it? That we're living in a world where all over the world we've seen a mushrooming of free trade agreements between countries in every continent on the planet. And free trade agreements do not virtually ever include the free movement of people. Now, the reason that the EU initially will play hardball is because they're fearful that if they were seen to give this to the United Kingdom, that half the other countries in the European Union would want the same thing too.
But that's a very real fear, which is why everybody from Juncker to Merkel to Tusk to all of them are saying, your vision of what might be
Yeah.
achieved is completely, utterly unrealistic, is not going to happen. At what point will you start to believe their words?
As a starting point for negotiations, you would be surprised if they said any different. I have a feeling they've got problems about to subsume them that are rather bigger than Brexit negotiations. I think that frankly, the bust-up between the Eastern European countries and Germany, effectively, over Mrs. Merkel saying last year, as many people as want to come can, and when they did come, Germany then says through the European Commission, you must take quotas, numbers of people, and they're just simply saying no, and I don't see that changing at all. My point is this, that Europe is beset by problems. They can start off, if they want, being tough with the United Kingdom, but ultimately, their electorates, the German car workers union, the French wine producers want a sensible deal with the UK.
But my instinct is that if you want to find problems, you're better off looking much closer over the next few months in terms of their relationship with Europe. Theresa May's already made it clear that she's not interested in some of the ideas you put forward during the Brexit campaign.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the point system to control future migration with Europe.
To be fair to the Prime Minister, there are other ways of doing it, but given her record as Home Secretary, yes, I'm slightly nervous.
Yeah, you said just a few days ago that you feared backsliding from Theresa May. So you don't trust Theresa May, basically. If she's a backslider, you clearly don't trust her.
She started off saying wonderful things. I mean, she wasn't the Prime Minister I would have chosen, but it all looked really good for the first few weeks. And the first wobble that I saw was at the G20, when she sort of stood beneath the flags and said that people had voted for some degree of control over immigration. Well, no, we didn't. We voted for control.
Right, so you're worried about Theresa May. You must be worried about Boris Johnson, because after, he was perhaps the most high-profile leader.
He was very important.
He was very important, you say. Well, this is what live, to travel, to study, to buy homes, to settle down. There will continue to be free trade and access to the single market. I mean, Boris seemed to be saying, don't worry, people, nothing much is going to change at all.
Well, ultimately, there's one certainty from Brexit, total certainty, that we have voted to take back control of our country. We voted to make all these big decisions.
Nobody knows what that means, and my point to you is that here you sit now on the sidelines.
No, it's very simple, actually. Parliament makes our laws, and our own courts judge them. End of. That is what we voted for. That is the ultimate test of sovereignty.
Well, it's very interesting you say Parliament makes the laws. I mean, David Davis has made it plain that Parliament won't be consulted through this negotiating process. He says it's far too sensitive and confidential. And he said to a committee just the other day, I may not be able to tell you everything, even in private hearings. So the government's going to do this on its own. It's not going to listen to Nigel Farage.
Well, they have a mandate to do that. They have a mandate to do that. Of course they do. But I would also add this. There wasn't much confusion in terms of what was being said during the Brexit campaign. Everybody from the figures on the right of politics, and let's say, for example, Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, we had...
Just in parentheses, do you believe that Boris Johnson really, in his heart, is committed to Brexit in the way you are, or for him was it a vehicle for personal political ambition?
No, I think he believed in it. I think it may have taken him a long time to make his mind up. I mean, he'd gone from being a Eurosceptic journalist in Brussels back in the 1990s to appearing to support the project. Now, I think in the end he did make his mind up, and I think it was genuine. But all of us, UKIP, Conservative, Labour, all of us that argue for Brexit made it clear we want to make our own laws in our own country, control our own borders, and crucially, not be members of the single market. There's no confusion about that in terms of people that voted for Brexit.
Well, you say no confusion, and you're very clear in your own mind. Does it stick in your throat that during the campaign before June 23rd, and clearly since June 23rd, people like Theresa May and David Davis steadfastly refuse to consult you?
Oh, they won't do. They won't do.
Why do you think that is?
Look, they hate me. I mean, I've cost them a Prime Minister, a Chancellor, a European Commissioner. I mean,
why would Theresa May hate you? You've got her into number 10.
Yeah, because it's a psychological thing. They see me as having wounded the tribe, and that's a crime that can never be forgiven. Look, I couldn't care less about that. I knew the day after Brexit that they were not going to involve me in any of their teams or any of their negotiations. I got that. I understood that. I've taken the view that I can do a lot from the European Parliament, and a lot, actually probably more, on the European question, not being leader of a domestic political party, which being on the road the whole time, supporting election campaigns up and down the country. So I know exactly where I am with this. I'm happy with that. I'm worried about the government. I'm worried about backsliding.
And you don't trust them. Let's just get to a yes-no thing. You don't trust this government.
Oh, I was told years ago, never trust the Tories, and that thought hasn't gone away.
So let me just expand on that thought and ask you what you know, if you see that Brexit isn't going to be delivered by 2020, for example, what do you do then?
Yeah, no, that's a perfectly fair question. I mean, to me, Brexit's easy. You know, we have back British passports, we have control of our fishing waters, and our companies are not subject to EU law through the single market. They're my three tests, if you like, of what Brexit means by 2020. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they deliver all of these things.
Well, let's get to my question. What do you do if it isn't delivered by 2020?
Well, then I couldn't walk away, could I? I wouldn't be able to go and do
this
all
is
the
another famous Farage semi-retirement.
No. I hope I never stand for election again, ever, anywhere. I hope I don't need to. I did not come into this for a career. I came into this for a cause, for a crusade.
Let's, if we may, just cast our mind back for a brief moment to the campaign itself. Are you ready now to express some regret for some of the things, including, frankly, falsehoods that were peddled by the Leave campaign during the campaign?
We've had 45 years of lies from those supporting the European project, telling us it was a common market. Don't worry your little heads, it'll never be political. And they go on lying. You know, the very day the European...
I wasn't asking about their campaign, I was asking about yours. Do you regret the lies that were told on your side?
On the very day the European Constitution was produced by Giscard, the House of Commons was told by the Europe Minister it was a mere tidying up exercise. Giscard said it was for a superstate. So we've had to put up with an endless diet of lies. Now, as far as the Leave campaign was concerned, there was one mistake that was made.
What was that?
There was a factual mistake that was made.
That?
That was the 350 million. And that was a factual
mistake. It was on the posters,
yeah. I mean,
on the battle buses.
A very small factual mistake.
The message to the people,
a very small
if you
factual
vote
mistake.
Brexit and get Brexit, £350 million a week will go to the NHS, and that is a complete falsehood.
Yeah, and if you vote Brexit, according to the Chancellor, each family will lose £4,500 a year.
You know,
look, there was some nonsense.
Why redirect my question to take a pop at the opposition? Why not now, because it's over, why not acknowledge, you know, some things were said that were false, that were lies, and you regret it?
I think that was the only fundamental mistake that was made in terms of fact.
Fundamental mistake?
How
did
because
it
the
happen?
net figure...
Because you were cynical? Because you would say almost anything to win?
It wasn't my figure, and I argued very strongly against it. I sat talking to Michael Gove, as I'm talking to you now, saying, drop it. It's an error. It doesn't work, because the net figure is 220 million a week, and nobody could argue with that. Now, actually, did it being 350 as opposed to 220 shift one single vote? I doubt it. But it did leave the establishment with a stick with which to beat us.
Well, they have other sticks too. That poster that you revealed, the breaking point.
Sorry, was
poster.
that a lie? Or was it a factual picture?
Well, I'm not discussing whether the picture itself was factual or not.
But the thing we're on here...
I'm discussing the message it sent to the people of Britain. There you were with your poster, which pictured all these people queuing at one of the border crossings into Europe's eastern flank. They were Syrians, they were Afghans probably, and Somalis.
They weren't queuing.
And
they were getting across borders because fences were going up. It was part of the Merkel madness.
They were not immigrants from Europe coming into the United Kingdom.
No, and that's why.
And that was the clear implication
and that's why the
of that poster.
And that's why the poster said the EU has failed us all. Look, let me explain something about that to you, okay? That morning, and that, by the way, was the first of a series of posters we were running for the last week of the campaign. That was the only one that was about the broader European question rather than the UK. That morning, that poster appeared in full-page national ads in a handful of British newspapers. It had been released at 10 p.m. the night before via the internet. It was out everywhere. And do you know something? There was very little criticism or condemnation of it.
Your own parliamentary, your own MP, the one MP you've got in Westminster, he was deeply uncomfortable.
No, he said nothing.
He said he was deeply uncomfortable.
You've got to listen to me and understand what I'm telling you. What happened in this referendum campaign? There was barely a note of criticism about that poster.
But when your own MP says he's deeply...
He said nothing.
What do you mean he said nothing?
Will you listen to me about the timings of this? There was very little criticism of that poster. And then, that afternoon, Joe Cox was murdered on a Yorkshire street, okay?
Yes, the Labour MP.
An horrendous event. And the Remain campaign decided they would conflate that poster with her killing, and that is when all the criticism started. Had that awful murder not happened, you wouldn't even be asking me.
The bottom line is your own MP resiled from that poster and its message.
Afterwards, everybody ran for the hills, because they're all cowards, and they didn't want to take any stick.
Your own MP is a coward?
Well, look, he's not UKIP. He doesn't believe we should even discuss the immigration issue. He never has done. All right, that's a separate issue.
My head's spinning. You're now telling me that even your own...
Well, they all did. They all ran for the hills. I mean, goodness me, the Vote Leave campaign had put out some very aggressive posters and criticism. But you've got to understand the context of what happened. The Remain side deliberately tried to use
40,000
that horrible
people,
murder.
40. I'm sure you know this much better than me because it involves you personally. 40,000 people signed a petition describing it as incitement to racial hatred. The Crown Prosecution Service has said they will review the case.
We'll let them.
You may. Well,
it's true. Look, you can get as upset as you like. It's a fact. That picture showed you what happened when Mrs. Merkel made the huge error she made last year. You would not even, you yourself would barely have known of the existence of this had it not been for that horrible murder. And that's what happened.
So when I ask you whether there are things you regret, you certainly are not interested in expressing any sort of regret for that.
I regret the truth. I regret the ridiculous things that Mrs. Merkel has done to Europe. I regret an endless series now of terrorist attacks that are taking place in Europe as a direct result of an irresponsible policy of letting people into the Schengen area wholesale without any checks at all.
Let's talk about the state of UKIP, if we may. You say you're still actively involved, and as you said, you're leading a group in the European Parliament as leader of the UKIP delegation. So you certainly haven't walked away entirely from the party, but the party is in a big mess, isn't it? I mean, some of the party's most senior figures...
It's in a mess because it has one MP who doesn't agree with anything the party stands for, and that is a problem. It's a problem because it's perceived to be a problem. Does the fact that he doesn't agree with anything we do, he condemns all our officials, he tried in the referendum to split us down the middle, does that actually affect, out in the country, the branches? No, not really. It's a conversation, it's a media conversation. Has it really damaged the grassroots of UKIP? I would say it hasn't.
Some of the party's most senior strategists, including the woman Alexander...
by the party in Wales. Look, let me tell you, there's one fundamental thing that has changed in UKIP. It was a grassroots party. It was an upwelling. It has had a volunteer structure through a national executive that runs it and makes the big decisions. Those people, I'm afraid, have been very vulnerable to lobbying by professional career politicians. And that has not helped UKIP over the last 18 months.
But, you know, it's not just about people's careerism, it's about ideas. This is what Alexandra Phillips, you know, who's worked so closely with you, this is what she said the other day. Ideologically, the Tories are doing the UKIP dance now. If you look at our 2015 manifesto, Theresa May has announced it all in the first months of being Prime Minister. Grammar schools, fracking, Brexit means Brexit, controlling immigration.
Yes, it all sounded very good in the first few weeks, and now it's not sounding quite so good, is it?
Well, no, it's not what she says. She says, what's the point of UKIP anymore? If the Tories are delivering what you wanted,
well, well, will they deliver it? You know, will they deliver it? That's the point, isn't it? That really is the key to all of this, and I worry. You know, I mean, the Hinkley Point deal is a very good case in point. You know, we were very critical of the Hinkley Point deal done with the Chinese over nuclear installations by George Osborne. The Prime Minister gave us the impression in the first couple of weeks she was going to veto it. Now it's been accepted.
There are a lot of rumours flying around, I'm sure you're very aware of them, that you say you're still in UKIP, of course you still are in UKIP, but you've got a very good friend, Aaron Banks, who says he's prepared to spend millions of pounds creating a new movement. I think he's going to call it the People's Movement, although he's probably not decided. But he wants you to lead it. Well, will you?
No, I'll help. I'll support. Of course I will. I think that grassroots campaigning has a role, a big role. I think what Leave.eu did in the referendum by building up 1 million online supporters was a really fascinating development in British politics. And we've seen it on the left, haven't we? We've seen 38 Degrees, we've seen Momentum. So I think what Mr. Banks wants to do is you know, a very sensible thing.
He also wants to internationalise this movement, and he said that you can be a nation, and since then you've actually appeared at a major campaign rally with him, saying not for all the money in the world would you contemplate voting for Hillary Clinton.
No.
Do you really, with all of his policies, you know, banning Muslims from entering the country, building a great big wall with Mexico, calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, you really think Donald Trump would be good for America? Is he your sort of politician?
Well, we're building a big wall in Calais as we speak, and George Bush built 600 miles of a wall with the Mexicans. So, you know, he has said some things. Of course, he said some things I don't agree with. Of course, there are positions on social issues where any British politician and any American politician, you know, simply aren't going to meet. But, you know, I went to tell the story of Brexit, and the story of Brexit is bigger than just the United Kingdom voting to leave and what the negotiating process will be. I think actually the story of Brexit is something that could completely transform politics across the entire Western world.
Why? What is it about Brexit that could have this international resonance?
It's very simple. You know, when all's said and done, Brexit happened because about 2.5 million people who did not vote at the last election, and who in many cases had never voted in their lives, went to the polls, and a clear majority of them did vote for Brexit. That's what swung it. And so the message that sends is that actually big politics and the big banks and the big businesses don't always have to win. You know, the sort of person that moans, it's hopeless, I hate it, but I can't change it. What Brexit shows is things can change. And I think that what Trump is perhaps beginning to do is to reach into some of that electorate.
And that's Trump. And do you think also that Marine Le Pen in France, that Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, maybe AFD, Alternative for Germany in Germany, these are allies that you now want to help, specifically help to win power in their countries? Is that going to be good for you?
I'm going to be a little bit cautious about, you know, who exactly I support.
Marine Le Pen, Geert Wilders, are those people that you believe represent your values?
No, I've never worked directly with them, as you know.
I'm just asking you, do they represent your values today?
Not in every way.
Why
no.
not? What is it about them that then is different from you?
Well, I think, you know, in the case of Mr. Wilders, I think that...
Is it racism? Xenophobia? What is it?
On the one hand, Geert Wilders argues for freedom of speech, which I get. I understand that. But then in the next sentence, he says he wants to ban the Quran. Well, there's a sort of slight inconsistency going on there. As far as Marine Le Pen's concerned, she's done good things. She's done good things with the Front National from the days of her father and the things that it stood for then. She has modernised the party. She has moved it on. I still think it's got a way to go.
And a final thought, because perhaps, well, actually there's no perhaps about it, the most important election coming up is the US election. You, to be clear about it, you believe it is best for the world, as well as for the United States, for Donald Trump to win.
I don't want Hillary to win because...
Well, that's not what I asked you. You want Donald Trump to win.
Well, I don't want Hillary to win, let's put it like that.
Well, no, I want you to tell me if you want... Do you want Donald Trump to win?
The West needs change. The West needs change, big change. Get away from these governments that are virtually owned by the multinationals, that have led us into an endless series of war, where we've seen the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. We need change.
Nigel Farage, we have to end there. Thank you for being on Hard Talk.